They said I died while I was having our baby. My husband's new girlfriend actually wore my wedding dress to celebrate. And his own mother tried to steal my newborn son and sell the second baby we had. But I was not dead. I was in a deep sleep, trapped inside my body, and I heard every evil word they spoke. When I finally woke up, I destroyed every single one of them. Before we begin, write your name and where in the world you are watching from in the comments below. This is a story about the deepest kind of cheating, about fighting just to stay alive, and about the most savage revenge you will ever hear about. My name is Samantha, and I need to tell you what happened on the day they thought I was gone forever.
They wanted me gone.
God, they truly wanted me to die right there. It all started when I was already 16 hours into labor. 16 hours of strong pain that made me feel like my insides were being torn apart. The heavy cramping came in huge, crushing waves. I looked over at my husband, Andrew. I was crying, desperate for him to hold my hand, to give me any comfort. But he was standing in the dark corner of the delivery room, staring at his phone. He was on his phone while I was screaming in total agony. The doctor kept telling me everything was fine, saying that first babies always take a lot of time and that I was doing a great job. Then something changed quickly. I felt it before anyone else did. A hot, wet feeling spreading fast under my body. Too much warmth. The nurse's face suddenly went bright white. She hit the emergency button, and the room was full of people instantly, shouting medical words that made no sense to me. The last clear thing I heard was the doctor shouting, "She is losing blood fast. We are losing her." My sight started to blur. The edges of the room went dark, like someone was slowly turning down the light switch. The steady beep, beep, beep of the heart monitor changed into one long, endless, screaming noise. And as everything faded to black, I heard Andrew's voice clearly. He was not crying. He was not scared. He just asked in a flat voice, "Is the baby okay?" He did not ask, "Is my wife okay?" He only asked about the baby. That one simple question should have told me everything I needed to know about the man I married. Then there was nothing. Complete darkness. Complete silence. I thought that was the end. I truly thought I was dead. But then I started to hear things. Voices that sounded soft and far away. The sound of rubber wheels rolling on a hard floor. Cold air touched my skin, making me want to flinch. I tried to open my eyes. I tried to scream. I tried to move just one finger. Nothing worked. My body was a strong jail cell, and I was locked inside it, fully awake. I heard the sound of a sheet being unfolded and pulled. It was laid right over my face. I could feel the rough cloth pressing down against my nose and my lips. I heard the tired voice of the doctor. "Time of death," he said, 3:47 a.m. I was screaming so loudly inside my mind. I am not dead. I am alive. I am right here. But no sound came out. Nothing moved. They were moving me somewhere else. I could feel the movement, hear the wheels squeaking and whining as they went down the hall. The place where the dead bodies go. Oh God, they were taking me to the morgue. The metal table was freezing cold under my back. I could feel every single degree of that cold shock, but I could not shiver. I could not react. I heard the man working there humming some slow, boring song as he walked around the cold room. The faint, cold humming stopped. I heard the attendant sigh, a long, tired sound that seemed to pull the oxygen right out of the room. Then there was a sudden, sharp intake of breath. The low, bored song stopped.
Hey,
did you see that?" The man's voice was suddenly high, laced with fear. The line had moved. The metal cart shuddered beneath me. Hands were grabbing my neck, feeling for a pulse that shouldn't be there. The sheet was ripped away. There was chaos.
Shouts.
The squeak of shoes running on tile. I was moving again.
Fast.
The jarring motion of the gurney sent pain shooting through my rigid body, but I couldn't flinch. I heard someone screaming for a doctor, and then the urgent, rhythmic thump-thump-thump of the hospital elevator speeding upward. I was back in the intensive care unit. The overhead lights were blinding, even though my eyes were closed. The air smelled of chemicals and rubber. The ventilator pushed air into my lungs in predictable, cold bursts. I was alive, but I was still frozen. A quiet, serious voice cut through the noise. It was Dr. Martinez. "We detected a faint, irregular rhythm," he explained to a nurse. "She's not gone. She is in a catastrophic state. Brain function is intact, but the connection to the body is broken. It is a rare disorder. We call it locked-in syndrome." I heard him pacing by my bedside. He gave the brutal statistics without emotion. There is less than a 5% chance of recovery. We must keep her stable for 30 days. After that, by law, the family can request termination of life support. We must speak to the husband. I tried to tell the doctor that I was right there. I tried to move my mouth to scream the word, "Andrew." I tried to signal my fear. But the sound that came out of my throat was only the dry click of the ventilator. The next voice I heard made the ice in my veins turn to acid. 30 days. It was Margaret, my mother-in-law. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the sterile silence of the room. "Doctor, Andrew has already suffered enough. Can you guarantee she won't be a vegetable forever?"
Dr.
Martinez answered carefully. "I cannot guarantee anything, Mrs. Mitchell, but we are obligated to try." Obligated. Margaret scoffed. "Well, Andrew, you heard the man. 30 days. We simply wait 30 days. Andrew's voice was soft, cold, and utterly detached. "Yes, Mother. 30 days. We need to focus on the baby now. I need to know the insurance is handled." My entire existence, my recovery, my life, it had been reduced to an expiration date and an insurance policy. I lay there, trapped, listening to the two people who were supposed to care for me most, planning my disposal. The next morning, Margaret returned with a legal pad. She was making lists. She was already in control. I heard the nurse approach her timidly. "Mrs. Mitchell, Samantha's parents, George and Martha, are here." They flew in immediately. Margaret's response was instant and final. "Send them away. I am the next of kin, and I control the visitor list. They are not on the approved list. This is a closed-door policy for the next 2 weeks while Samantha stabilizes." I wanted to burn the hospital down with my rage. They were keeping my parents from me. My poor father and mother, grieving outside the doors, not knowing I was conscious, not knowing the horror that was about to unfold. Later that day, I heard Margaret talking to Andrew on the phone while standing right beside my bed. "Yes, Andrew, I've filed the paperwork," she said with vicious satisfaction. She was asking for hope, wasn't she? That's too simple. Too common. I changed the name. The baby's name is officially Madison Mitchell now. It sounds much stronger. My firstborn child. The name I had fought for, the name I had whispered during those 16 hours of labor, erased. Stolen, just like my mobility. But the real, horrifying betrayal began 2 days later when a nurse carelessly left a functioning baby monitor on the bedside table. It had been brought in earlier so Andrew could play the baby's recorded heartbeat for me, a sentimental gesture that now became my lifeline to the ugly reality. The sound crackled to life, clearly picking up the noise inside the Mitchell home, 40 miles away. I heard Andrew speaking, his voice relaxed, happy, almost giddy. "It's perfect, Jennifer," he was saying. "Just perfect. Jennifer." I knew the name. She was a younger accountant who had started working with Andrew 6 months ago. The woman he swore was just a friend when I asked him about the late nights at the office. "She's sleeping so sweetly," Jennifer chirped. Her voice was too loud, too close to the microphone. "We did it, didn't we? It's exactly how we planned. You get the money, I get the domestic life, and Margaret gets to run the show." Margaret chimed in from the background. It was never going to work out with Samantha Andrew. She was too emotional, too sensitive. She would have wanted to manage the money. Jennifer is compliant. And once the 30 days are up, the $500,000 from the policy will ensure we are comfortable for years to come. The conspiracy was laid bare, broadcast directly into my paralyzed ears. They hadn't just been having an affair. They had been planning my death. They had calculated the timing, the legality, and the financial gain. They were using my tragic condition as a blueprint for their new, convenient life. The world blurred into a terrifying hellscape of beeping monitors and cruel whispers. Every beat of my heart was a painful reminder that I could not move, could not speak, could not stop them. Around day 5, the phone in my room rang. Margaret answered it before the nurse could pick up the line. "Hello? Oh, George." "Yes, it's Margaret," she said, her voice dropping into a deep, fake sadness. I knew it was my father calling. I heard the muffled worry in his voice on the other end. "George, I'm so sorry. I know this is difficult," Margaret continued, projecting the perfect image of the morning, helpful in-law. "The truth is, Samantha's condition deteriorated quickly after the hemorrhage. The doctor tried everything, but we lost her." Silence. I imagined my father collapsing onto a kitchen chair, the sound of his grief traveling across the miles. "We decided to move forward with a small, private cremation yesterday," Margaret lied smoothly. "It was her wish, George. We thought it best to avoid unnecessary trauma. No, there won't be a service. Andrew needs peace now to focus on little Madison." She hung up the phone abruptly. My parents were convinced I was dead and had been reduced to ashes. The cruelest part of the plot was complete. My family had been neutralized. There would be no investigation, no second opinions, no one coming to check on the vegetable. By day 7, the nurses were gossiping outside my room. "Did you hear?" one whispered excitedly. "Mr. Mitchell's mistress, Jennifer. She's moved right into the house. They had a big welcome home baby party last night. My home, my baby, now occupied by the woman who is planning to profit from my death." Then, the monitor crackled to life, catching a loud, chaotic argument. "You have no right to be here." Margaret's voice was screeching. "This is not your home. Get out." "That is my daughter's house." It was my father, George. His voice was ragged, choked with fury and pain. "You told us she was dead. We came here to see our granddaughter, Margaret." "She is my granddaughter. And this woman," Margaret paused, the sound of her hand hitting something hard echoing over the monitor. "This is Jennifer, Andrew's fiancée. She is the mother now. Get off my property. You have no rights to this child." The horrible, sickening truth hit me like a physical blow. My parents had seen the celebration. They had crashed the party, heartbroken, only to find the replacement mother holding their granddaughter. I heard the sound of struggle, followed by heavy, angry footsteps retreating. They were being forcibly removed. My mother was sobbing. I lay there, immobile, rigid. My life had been systematically stripped away. My identity, my child's name, my parents' access, and soon, my life support. I was a spectator in my own, unfolding tragedy, waiting for day 30 to arrive. But as the darkness closed in, a tiny, burning resolve sparked inside the prison of my mind. If I cannot move, I will listen. I will memorize every word. And if I get out of this cell, I will make them pay for every single sound. The 15th day of my silent imprisonment brought with it the crushing reality of their timeline. The hospital room felt colder, the air heavier, as the financial clock started ticking louder than the respirator beside my head. The door was often left ajar now. The nurses felt confident I was truly gone. They treated the room like a storage closet for a body waiting to be discarded. This negligence, born of indifference, was my greatest asset. I heard Margaret's voice first, sharp and clear. She was outside the door, talking on her mobile phone, convinced she was out of earshot. "Yes, the agent confirmed it," she stated. 30 days. That is the legal window for claiming the full amount if we maintain the declaration of permanent vegetative state. The policy pays out $500,000. I need you to confirm that the paperwork is ready, Andrew. We cannot afford any slip-ups. She paused, clearly listening to my husband on the other end. No one suspects, Margaret continued, her voice dropping slightly, laced with venomous satisfaction. Her parents are shattered. They think she is already cremated, thanks to my little call. They are mourning, not investigating. Everything is running according to schedule. We just need Samantha to remain quiet until day 30. The cold calculation of her words was terrifying. $500,000. My life reduced to a payout, a bureaucratic deadline. They were counting the hours until they could legally pull the plug. The ventilator whooshed, pulling air into my useless lungs, a sound so loud in the quiet room it seemed to mock my impending death. Day 16, Day 17, Day 18. The days blurred into a paralyzing loop of fear and frustration. I could smell the faint antiseptic tang of the hospital, the warm, sterile scent of the bedside lamp, and the metallic tang of the oxygen tube near my face. I cataloged every shift change, every cleaning cart that rattled past, every muted weather report humming from the television in the hallway. I felt the pressure of the sheets on my skin, the constant, dull ache of unmoving muscles, and the overwhelming, psychological pain of knowing my newborn daughter was being raised by a fraud and a predator. During this waiting period, Jennifer, the mistress, made a single appearance. Andrew brought her in late on day 19. They were dressed in expensive clothes, smelling of wine and perfume. They weren't there to grieve. They were there to celebrate their upcoming windfall. "Look at her," Jennifer murmured, her voice strangely casual, as if discussing a poorly preserved piece of furniture. "She's so still. It's hard to believe she was yelling at me just a few weeks ago." Andrew chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound that made my non-existent blood boil. "She was always dramatic, Jenny, always making a scene. But now, she's quiet. And soon, she'll be profitable." He leaned closer to my face, and the closeness of his presence made my heart try desperately to beat faster, though the monitor remained steady. "Don't worry, Sammy," he whispered, his breath sickly sweet with alcohol. "Madison is having a wonderful time. We are one happy family, just waiting on that deadline, and then we can truly start our new life. You were always too much trouble." They left, locking the door behind them this time. Andrew's betrayal was complete. He was not just selfish. He was a murderer in waiting, casually discussing my expiration date while standing next to my inert body. Day 20 arrived, ushered in by the efficient, silent presence of Dr. Martinez. He was the one shining light in this dark facility, the physician who had fought hardest to save me, and the only person who treated me as a patient, not a corpse. He checked my reflexes, running a cold metal instrument along the sole of my foot. No response. He checked my pupils. Unresponsive. He pulled up a stool beside my bed, lowered his voice, and began speaking directly to me, ignoring the official diagnosis. "Samantha, I know they are counting down the days. I know Andrew has been difficult, focused only on the paperwork and the financial arrangements. But I want you to know something huge that changes the entire landscape. I could hear the tension in his voice, a mix of ethical duty and suppressed excitement. When you were rushed into the emergency cesarean section, the chaos was immense. Andrew was fixated on the primary baby. He explicitly instructed the staff, only communicate necessary information. I want minimal stress and no surprises. He was so controlling, so demanding that we only focused on the immediate outcome that he missed something truly essential. Dr. Martinez paused, looking around the room, then leaned in closer. Samantha, you did not have one baby. You had twins. A second girl was delivered moments after Madison. She required stabilization and was immediately transferred to the neonatal intensive care unit, the NICU. She has been recovering perfectly, quietly, under a separate medical chart, away from Andrew's scrutiny. A shockwave, silent and internal, ripped through me. Twins. I had 2 daughters. My failure to deliver one healthy baby was a lie. I had delivered 2, and Andrew only knew about one. The sudden, overwhelming rush of protectiveness nearly caused my chest to heave. I had a second daughter, a hidden child, safe, for now, from their clutches. Dr. Martinez checked his watch. She is doing wonderfully. We call her Baby B for now. She is strong. I was waiting for the right time to tell Andrew, but now, considering what I have heard about their plans, perhaps I should simply inform him of the fact. Just as he finished the sentence, the door burst open. It was Andrew, looking impatient, phone pressed to his ear. Martinez, I need to know the latest, Andrew said curtly, walking towards the bedside table to grab a cup of the lukewarm coffee the nurse had left. We are approaching the end of the legal period, and I need to finalize the paper. Andrew stopped mid-sentence as Dr. Martinez stood up, blocking his view of the machinery. Mr. Mitchell, the doctor interrupted, his tone formal and uncompromising. I have serious medical news that takes precedence over any administrative concerns. Please put your phone down. Andrew sighed dramatically, shoving the phone into his pocket.
Fine.
Spit it out. Is the diagnosis holding firm? Because the lawyer needs confirmation that she is unresponsive, non-viable, or whatever the terminology is. The terminology, Dr. Martinez stated, his voice steady, is that your wife gave birth to twins. You have a second daughter. She is stable and ready to be discharged from the NICU today. The coffee cup Andrew was holding dropped instantly. The cheap plastic hit the linoleum floor with a sickening clatter, splashing dark liquid across the sterile white tiles. The color drained from Andrew's face. His self-control vanished entirely, replaced by raw, frantic fear.
What?
A second? You are lying, he hissed, stepping menacingly toward the doctor. That is impossible. The ultrasound only showed one baby. We discussed this. Ultrasounds are not always perfect, Mr. Mitchell, Dr. Martinez replied calmly. And the delivery was extremely complicated. Your instructions were to minimize communication. This child needed special care immediately. She is healthy now. You are the father of 2 daughters. Andrew pressed his hands against his temples, pacing in a small, violent circle near the foot of my bed. This was not the reaction of a man receiving news of a miracle. This was the reaction of a fraud whose perfectly laid plans had just been blown apart.
No. Andrew visperet frantically.
This cannot happen. This changes everything. The money, the house, the inheritance, they will investigate the hospital records. We cannot have another variable. He looked wildly at Dr. Martinez, his eyes manic. Does Margaret know? Does anyone know? Only the essential staff involved in the NICU and myself know, the doctor confirmed. Andrew grabbed the doctor's arm, his grip hard and desperate. Then you tell no one. Do you hear me? No one. You keep that baby a secret. This is already a disaster, and a second child will raise questions we absolutely cannot afford right now. The doctor stared at him, his face registering pure disgust. Mr. Mitchell, this is a patient, a child, not a variable to be hidden. It is a liability. Andrew snarled, dropping his voice to a dangerous hiss, entirely ignoring my silent presence. We are talking about $500,000 and a clean break. If the parents, the authorities, or the insurance people find out there was another child kept separate, they will start digging into the whole situation. This cannot happen. You tell no one. Keep the second baby in the NICU. If you have to, but she is not to be released, and her existence is not to be recorded anywhere public until after the deadline. Andrew straightened his tie, breathing heavily, trying to regain the facade of control. He shot one hateful glance at my body, as if blaming me for the complication of the second twin, before storming out of the room. The heavy silence returned. I lay there, my internal fire now stoked to an inferno. My children were in danger, not just from neglect, but from the cold machinations of two people obsessed with money. The second twin, the baby I never knew I had, was now the ticking time bomb in their scheme. Dr. Martinez sighed and ran a hand over his face. He looked down at me, shaking his head slowly. You heard that, didn't you, Samantha? He murmured. I believe you heard every word. The heavy silence returned. I lay there, my internal fire now stoked to an inferno. My children were in danger, not just from neglect, but from the cold machinations of two people obsessed with money. The second twin, the baby I never knew I had, was now the ticking time bomb in their scheme. Dr. Martinez sighed and ran a hand over his face. He looked down at me, shaking his head slowly. You heard that, didn't you, Samantha? He murmured. I believe you heard every word. He knew he could not act on the overheard conversation alone. It was a violation of privacy and relied on the word of a man who was already deeply worried about his patient's safety. He could only wait and watch. And so we waited. Days 21, 22, and 23 dissolved into the usual sterile routine of the intensive care unit, each second dragging the hands of the clock closer to the planned termination date, day 30. My paralysis held me firm, but the truth, the horrible, undeniable knowledge of what Andrew and Margaret planned, was a powerful, dark engine grinding inside my skull. I had to live. I had two daughters who needed me. On the night of the 27th day, the familiar crackle of the forgotten baby monitor filled the corner of my sterile room. Andrew, Margaret, and Jennifer were in the living room of my home, a home that felt miles away, yet was terrifyingly close through the flimsy plastic speaker. The atmosphere was celebratory, laced with impatient greed. They were discussing the final details before they came to pull the plug. We are almost there, Margaret said, her voice dry and brittle as dead leaves. Only 3 more days until the paperwork is clean. The lawyer confirmed that once she's declared legally gone, the insurance payout will be swift. $500,000, Andrew whispered, the sound thick with avarice. It still feels unreal. Jennifer giggled, a sickening, triumphant sound. And we get to be a real family. Madison is doing great, Andrew. She really loves me. My internal scream was suffocating. They were celebrating my death, and the woman who had stolen my life was now claiming my child. Then Margaret's voice hardened. But we need to talk about the complication. The doctor's error. Andrew groaned. The second baby. Margaret, I don't know what to do. If the insurance company finds out there were 2, they might look closer into the whole situation. It complicates the grieving father story. Jennifer chimed in, her tone pragmatic. It's loose end, Andrew. A big, crying, expensive loose end. Madison is enough. We can't raise two babies simultaneously and keep the narrative straight. Margaret cleared her throat, and her next words fell into the silence of the ICU room like shards of ice. This was the moment I realized the depths of their depravity. I have a solution, Margaret stated calmly. A clean solution. My friend, Mrs. Davies, has been trying to adopt for years. She has money, cash, and she wants a little girl. She doesn't care about background checks. This would be entirely private. Andrew hesitated. Even his cold heart seemed to skip a beat. Sell her? Are you talking about selling the baby? Don't be dramatic, Andrew, Margaret snapped. It's a placement, an agreement. She provides a safe, private home, and we get $100,000 in cash. No paper trail. It solves our immediate problem of risk, and it gives us extra financial cushioning. $100,000. They were discussing selling my newborn daughter for $100,000, writing her out of existence as casually as canceling a magazine subscription. Jennifer quickly supported the plan. Think of it, Andrew. It's perfect. It removes the complication, gives us cash, and nobody needs to know the NICU baby even existed. When the doctor releases her, we tell them we'll take her, and then Margaret handles the transfer immediately. Andrew went silent for a long moment. I could practically hear him weighing his conscience against the promise of money. The money one. $100,000 cash, he repeated softly. Okay, we do it. But it has to be fast, Margaret. As soon as the paperwork is signed here. Inside my immobile body, the rage reached a boiling point that I didn't know a human could withstand. This was not just betrayal. This was the ultimate violation of motherhood, a crime so monstrous it threatened to shatter the walls of my prison. My mind screamed and thrashed, a furious storm desperate for release. And then something happened. I felt a violent, internal convulsion deep in my chest. My heart, reacting to the extreme emotional trauma, began to pound with erratic, frantic power. My chest felt tight, searing hot. The electronic heartbeat monitor next to my bed, which had hummed along steadily at a low, even rate for weeks, suddenly went insane. The rhythmic green line shot up vertically across the screen, a terrifying, jagged mountain range, registering a catastrophic spike in my heart rate and blood pressure.
Beep, 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 beep.
The high-pitched, insistent alarm pierced the quiet darkness of the room, overriding the voices from the baby monitor. A red warning light flashed violently over my head. A nurse, a quiet woman named Sarah who always checked my lines with meticulous care, rushed into the room, her eyes wide with shock. Code red. Vitals crashing. She yelled into the intercom. She immediately began checking my pupils and regulating the oxygen flow, but the noise from the baby monitor, which Margaret and Andrew had conveniently forgotten to switch off in their rush, was still audible beneath the medical chaos. Has to be done privately, Margaret's voice hissed through the speaker. $100,000 cash.
No witnesses.
Nurse Sarah froze mid-adjustment. Her eyes flicked from the frantic, jagged line on the monitor back to the monitor speaker on the table. She heard the words, clear and damning. She looked down at my face. My eyes, though unable to move, were fixed in an expression of pure, agonizing terror. She quickly silenced the physical alarms and stabilized my breathing, but she did not turn off the baby monitor. She stepped back from the bed, her breath catching in her throat. The sound of rapid footsteps approached the room. The supervisor was arriving. What happened, Sarah? Her heart rate spiked to almost 200. The supervisor, a stern woman named Ms. Davies, demanded, adjusting her stethoscope. Nurse Sarah's hands were shaking as she pointed first to the flat, unmoving face of her patient, and then to the small, cheap baby monitor. "I heard them," Sarah whispered, her voice tight with conviction. "They were talking about money." "She heard them too, Ms. Davies." Her heart rate only spiked when they started planning to sell the other baby. Ms. Davies looked confused, then horrified, listening to the faint, continuous stream of casual conversation coming from the small speaker. Plans for the future, plans for the money. "She's in a locked-in state, Sarah. She can't possibly comprehend." "No, you don't understand," Sarah interrupted, her gaze returning to my silent face. "I think she can hear everything. They're planning to sell a child, Ms. Davies. I heard them discussing $100,000 cash transfer just as the monitor went off. They're coming tomorrow to terminate life support. We need to call social services and the police right now. They can't pull the plug until this is investigated." The realization hung heavy in the air. The critical step had been taken. Just hours before the clock ran out on the 30th day, the seed of external rescue was finally planted. My silent cry had finally broken through the electrical wires and the walls of the hospital. I was not alone in the fight anymore. The realization hung heavy in the air. The critical step had been taken. Just hours before the clock ran out on the 30th day, the seed of external rescue was finally planted. My silent cry had finally broken through the electrical wires and the walls of the hospital. I was not alone in the fight anymore. The shift changed at 11 o'clock post-meridian. The new night nurse, a quiet woman named Carol, checked my vitals. For 13 long days, I had pushed, strained, and commanded my body, yet it remained a prison of bone and flesh. I tried to move my toe, my eyelid, anything that could transmit the desperate urgency of my mind, but the electrical pathway was broken. I lay still, listening to the soft, rhythmic pumping of the life support machine, knowing that Margaret and Andrew had set their alarm for the next morning. At exactly 11:47 post-meridian, a sharp, white flash of pure, agonizing will detonated in my skull. I focused all the hatred, all the fear for my children, into one minuscule channel, my right index finger. It was a muscle I had not used in 30 days. The effort was immense, painful, and blindingly consuming. And then, there it was. Not a movement, but a flicker. A minute, involuntary twitch of the tip of my finger against the crisp, cold hospital sheet. Nurse Carol did not see it. She finished logging the numbers, adjusted my intravenous drip, and left the room, the door swinging quietly shut behind her. I waited, heart hammering against my ribs, determined to replicate the miracle. I pushed again, feeling the burn in the unused nerve pathways. The clock crept toward 2 in the morning. At 2:17 anti-meridian on the morning of the 30th day, the day they planned to murder me, I managed it again. This time, the tremor was unmistakable, lasting for half a second. My index finger lifted barely a quarter of an inch and fell back down. A junior resident, doing routine late-night checks, caught the movement. He frowned, checked my chart, and saw the grim diagnosis, locked-in syndrome. He dismissed it, attributing it to muscle spasm, and stepped away. But then, as he turned toward the door, he heard it. A small, ragged, involuntary sound escaped my throat, a sound that bypassed the paralysis, fueled by 30 days of agonizing silence. It was a groan, a rasp of air across the vocal cords. The resident rushed back, shining a small penlight into my eyes. He noted the dilation, a slight but definite reaction. He called Dr. Martinez immediately, ignoring the late hour. Dr. Martinez arrived in under 10 minutes, his face etched with concern. He leaned over me, his voice low and professional. "Samantha? If you can hear me, blink once." I pushed. I strained. I focused on the task, fighting the resistance of the damaged nerves.
Blink. DR.
Martinez's sharp intake of breath was the only sound in the room. 2 blinks if you are in pain. Blink, blink. Agony. Samantha, he whispered, I need to know what you heard. Were you aware of everything going on around you? I focused all my remaining strength into the simple, primal act of communication. I forced my eyelids open, wide and staring, locking my gaze onto his face. I gathered the air deep in my lungs, bypassing the tubes with sheer force of will, and expelled the one word that encapsulated my entire struggle: babies. It was barely audible, a dry whisper, but it sounded like a battle cry in the sterile silence of the room. Dr. Martinez straightened up, his eyes wide with a terrifying realization. My God. She heard everything. The insurance policy, the termination date, the conspiracy, the plan to sell the second child. He moved instantly, the calm doctor replaced by a man of urgent action. He ordered the ventilator removed immediately, the oxygen tube replaced with a simpler mask. I could breathe, heavily and painfully, but I could speak. Dr. Martinez, I gasped, the cold air burning my throat. Listen, no time. They come at 10 o'clock. Get my parents, George and Mother.
Now.
He nodded sharply. I've already contacted the supervisor about the child welfare issue. Sarah the nurse was specific. Social services are alerted. Now, who do I call next? The police, I rasped. Andrew Mitchell.
Fraud.
Attempted murder.
Conspiracy to traffic.
Tell them I have information they need to hear before 10. The phone calls were frantic.
DR.
Martinez spoke with the police captain, then with the hospital's administration, securing my room like a fortress. By 4 o'clock anti-meridian, my mother and father, George and Mother, were speeding toward the hospital. They burst into the room just before 5 o'clock. My mother screamed, not in horror, but in a raw, overwhelming flood of relief, rage, and confusion. Samantha. Oh, God, Samantha. They told us you were gone. They said you were cremated. My mother collapsed into a chair next to the bed, gripping my hand, tears streaming down her face. My father, George, stood rigidly, his face white with shock and disbelief. They tricked us, my father choked out, his voice thick with unshed grief. We held a memorial service, Samantha.
We mourned you.
The pain of their betrayal was almost worse than the physical paralysis. I squeezed my mother's hand weakly. I'm here, Mother. I heard everything. Every single word. Andrew and Margaret, they are monsters. I knew I needed to be coherent and strategic. My voice was still weak, but the adrenaline of survival drove the words out. Father, listen. We have to move fast. They are coming to pull the plug at 10 o'clock. We have to stop them before the insurance money is claimed.
DR.
Martinez had the foresight to call my lawyer, Martha Vance, who arrived looking tired but determined, carrying a massive leather briefcase. She understood the urgency immediately. Samantha, Dr. Martinez explained the situation. Martha said, her tone professional, cutting through the grief. We need concrete proof for the police to act before 10 o'clock. Otherwise, they can claim the legal termination papers are valid. The will, I dictated, closing my eyes momentarily, remembering the quiet afternoon I spent updating my documents months ago, just in case. I updated the will 6 months ago, after Andrew suggested we buy a joint policy for $500,000. Martha pulled out a printed document. Yes, the Mitchell Family Trust Modification. It states that in the event of my death, or my incapacitation where I cannot make decisions, I continued, struggling with each syllable, custody of all my children and management of all my assets, including the entirety of the $500,000 life insurance payout, transfers immediately and irrevocably to my parents, George and Mother. Martha's face softened slightly. It is legally binding, Samantha. Andrew has no control over the assets if you are incapacitated or upon your death. He was relying on the old will. The relief washed over me. I had protected my children financially, even if I hadn't known I would have to fight for them from inside a coma. There's more, I whispered. The house. Andrew has been seeing a woman named Jennifer. I suspected fraud long ago. I installed security cameras in the main living room, the kitchen, and the nursery 3 weeks before the delivery. They are small, wireless, and the footage is backed up to a secure cloud server, only accessible with my password. Martha's eyebrows shot up. Video evidence of them plotting child trafficking, discussing the insurance money, and bringing the mistress into the house? Samantha, this is everything. She opened her briefcase, her fingers flying across the keyboard of her small laptop. She connected to the server immediately, securing the last 30 days of footage, the horrifying, undeniable video records of Andrew, Margaret, and Jennifer meticulously planning my end and their new life. By 7 o'clock Andy Meridian, the police captain, a stern woman named Captain Hayes, was in the room, reviewing the digital evidence on Martha's screen. Social services confirmed they had taken protective custody of the infant girl, Hope, from the Mitchell residence at 6 o'clock anti-meridian, due to the imminent threat of trafficking. We have everything we need for immediate arrest, Mrs. Mitchell, Captain Hayes said, turning off the laptop. Fraud, conspiracy, and attempted child trafficking based on the taped conversation about the $100,000 cash transfer. But we must let them walk into the trap. We need them here when the plug is scheduled to be pulled. I swallowed hard, fear mixing with triumphant anticipation. I was no longer the vegetable they dismissed. I was the strategist, the witness, and the living victim. Dr. Martinez leaned in close. They will be here at 10 o'clock sharp. Get some rest, Samantha. You have a battle to win. My mother held my hand, tears drying on her face, replaced by a fierce, maternal resolve. We waited. The hours until 10 o'clock stretched out like an eternity, but I was awake, alive, and ready to face the men and women who had tried to bury me. The stage was set for the great confrontation. The hours until 10 o'clock stretched out like an eternity, but I was awake, alive, and ready to face the men and women who had tried to bury me. The stage was set for the great confrontation. My parents stood discreetly near the door, shielded by the privacy curtain that Dr. Martinez had lowered. 2 men, sharp-eyed and serious, stood with them. They were officers, waiting on my signal. I was sitting upright in the bed, my back aching from months of paralysis, but the pain was a dull whisper beneath the roar of adrenaline. My mother had helped me into a clean, simple hospital gown, and I had brushed my hair back from my face. I looked frail, perhaps, but certainly not dead. The digital clock on the bedside table flipped to 9:47 a.m. Dr. Martinez checked my vital signs one last time. Remember, Samantha, he whispered, his voice low and firm. You are the witness. Keep your story simple, focused, and damning. I've rehearsed it 1,000 times. I managed, my voice still rough and used. 9:59. The silence in the room was thick and suffocating. We waited for the sound of the approaching footsteps that would signal the end of my marriage and the beginning of my true life. At precisely 10 o'clock, the silence was broken. Heavy, confident footsteps approached the intensive care unit door. Margaret's voice, sharp and demanding, cut through the quiet hallway. We are here to see the patient, she announced, though she sounded more like she was announcing the arrival of royalty. We have the papers signed and certified. Dr. Martinez, please step aside. Dr. Martinez stood tall in the doorway, blocking the view into the room. Margaret, Andrew, I need to speak with you both about recent developments regarding Samantha's condition. There are no developments, Margaret scoffed. I could hear the rustle of the legal documents in her hand. The 30th day is here. The legal window is closed. Move. I heard the sound of Margaret physically shoving the doctor aside. They burst into the room. Andrew walked first, holding a large paper coffee cup. He wore an expensive gray suit, looking like the grieving, responsible widower he intended to become in the next hour. Behind him, Margaret stalked in, radiating cruel satisfaction. Her eyes were hard, fixed on the array of machines that kept me alive. Jennifer trailed in last, wearing a muted color dress, trying to look appropriately sober for the termination of a life, my life. Their eyes swept the room, searching for the still, inert body they expected. Then they saw me. I was sitting upright, my hands resting on the white sheet. I looked directly at Andrew. My eyes did not blink. Andrew froze instantly, his jaw dropping open. The paper coffee cup slipped from his fingers. It hit the polished floor with a sickening, wet thud, splattering dark brown liquid across the pristine white tiles. The sound of the cup hitting the ground was the loudest noise in the universe. Margaret stopped dead in her tracks, her face turning from furious red to a pale, terrifying gray. She clutched the termination papers to her chest. Jennifer gasped, a high, thin sound of terror and disbelief, and instinctively took a step back, trying to disappear into the doorway. I spoke. My voice was weak, but it cut through the silence like a sharp blade. "Hello, Andrew," I said. The sound was flat, cold, devoid of any affection. "You're late. I thought you'd be more eager to pull the plug." Andrew swallowed hard, taking another step back until his hips bumped against the foot of the bed. "Samantha, what is this?" he stammered. He looked frantically at Margaret, searching for an explanation, a lifeline to the reality they had manufactured. Margaret finally found her voice, though it was strained and high. "This is impossible. The doctor, he said she was a vegetable. She can't be awake." I ignored Margaret, keeping my eyes locked on the man who had shared my bed for a decade. "I heard every word, Andrew. Every single word." I confirmed. "I heard your mother dismiss me as a vegetable. I heard you and Jennifer planning your future in our home. I heard you tell my parents I was dead and that I had been cremated. That was a lovely touch, Margaret. Did you really think my mother wouldn't call the morgue?" Margaret tried to rally, raising the stack of documents. "These papers give us the legal right to stop care. You are incapacitated, Samantha. This changes nothing legally." "Oh, it changes everything, Margaret," I countered. "Because I was not incapacitated. I was listening. I was witness to your entire plan to terminate my life for $500,000 in insurance money." I paused, letting the weight of the accusations settle on them. Andrew's face was slick with sweat. He started to shake his head in denial, weakly lifting his hands. "And then there's Grace," I continued, my voice gaining strength as the pure, toxic anger took over. The name hit Andrew like a physical blow. He stared at me, dumbfounded. "Grace? Who is Grace?" "The twin, Andrew," I stated simply. "The twin you never wanted Dr. Martinez to tell you about. The twin you and your mother planned to sell for cash." Jennifer made a small sound, a whimper, and pressed her back against the wall, covering her mouth with her hand. I leaned forward, the movement causing a sharp pull in my side, but I forced myself to endure it. "You know, Margaret," I said, looking at the older woman who had tormented me for years. "Attempting to harvest insurance money by pulling the plug is bad enough. But planning to sell a newborn baby to an acquaintance for $100,000 cash? That's next-level criminal, even for you. That was the signal. Two men in dark blue uniforms stepped swiftly from behind the privacy curtain. A third man, wearing a plain gray suit and holding a badge wallet open, moved to cut off the doorway, standing just behind Jennifer. Andrew Mitchell, the detective announced, his voice booming and official. You are under arrest for attempted felony fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and attempted child trafficking. Andrew let out a choked sound, a mix of panic and utter shock.
What?
This is a mistake. You can't listen to her. She's mentally unstable. The uniformed officers quickly moved to him, grabbing his arms. Andrew struggled, thrashing weakly. Read him his rights, Officer Reynolds, the detective instructed calmly. As the officer began the monotonous recitation of his Miranda rights, Andrew stared at me, pure hatred replacing the fear in his eyes. He realized, too late, that he had underestimated the woman he thought he had buried. Margaret Mitchell, the detective continued, turning his attention to my mother-in-law, who was still frozen, clutching the useless termination papers. You are under arrest for accessory to attempted murder, conspiracy to commit fraud, and attempted child trafficking. Margaret screamed, a high, inhuman sound. This is outrageous. I am his mother. I was protecting the family legacy. As the officers put handcuffs on her wrists, she fought them, kicking wildly and shouting obscenities that were muffled as they guided her toward the door. The unused termination papers slipped from her grasp, fluttering down onto the dark coffee stain on the floor. Jennifer, pale and shaking, was detained quietly by the detective. She didn't look at me. She just stared at the floor, realizing the price of her ambition was 3 years in prison, not a luxurious new home. The door swung open again, but this time it was my mother. She walked in slowly, reverently, carrying 2 bundles tightly wrapped in white blankets. The sight of them erased the horror of the arrests. Samantha, my mother whispered, tears streaming down her face, tears of joy this time. They're here. She approached the bed. She placed the baby I knew as Madison, my hope, carefully onto the bed beside me. Then, she gently unwrapped the second bundle, revealing a tiny, perfect face, the face of the daughter they had planned to sell. I reached out with my right index finger, the same finger that had twitched in the darkest hour, and gently touched the twins' cheek. She grasped my finger with her tiny, fragile hand. The emotional and physical rush was overwhelming, stabilizing me instantly. Hope, I whispered to the first baby, who stirred slightly. Then I looked at the second twin, the baby who had been hidden away, the secret that had shattered their perfect crime. And you, I said, my voice thick with emotion, you are Grace, because that is what saved us.
Pure Grace.
The police were leading a shackled Andrew past the foot of my bed. He tried one last desperate plea. Samantha, please, don't do this. Think about our life. Think about our children. He begged, his voice cracking. I looked up at him, my expression utterly devoid of pity or pain. I looked past the expensive suit, past the tears of self-pity, and saw the small, greedy man he truly was. You have no children, Andrew. I told him, the words simple and final. You lost the right to that title the moment you chose $500,000 over my life and $100,000 over the life of your daughter. You are nothing to us. Now get out. Andrew Mitchell was led away, his footsteps echoing down the hall, followed by the sound of the ICU door closing softly behind the procession of justice. The room was suddenly quiet, bathed in the soft morning light. I was finally alone, surrounded by the warmth of my mother and the soft, breathing presence of my two daughters. I had fought death, betrayal, and paralysis, and I had won. The scent of antiseptic and stale coffee slowly faded, replaced by the warmth of recovery and the clean, comforting smell of baby powder. The victory in the ICU was only the beginning. Samantha's physical fight continued for 3 more agonizing weeks. The locked-in syndrome was defeated, but her body had paid a heavy price. Physical therapy was a grueling, constant reminder of how close she had come to never moving again. She relearned how to grip, how to step, and how to speak without the raspy whisper that had saved her life.
Dr.
Martinez, who became a true friend, made sure the court received daily updates confirming Samantha's competency and the full extent of the conspiracy she had survived. The evidence was overwhelming. The video footage from the hidden cameras in the Mitchell house, showing Margaret and Jennifer discussing the sale of baby Hope's twin, Grace, was undeniable. The documented phone calls between Andrew and the insurance agent, timed precisely to the 30th day, sealed their financial plot. 3 months later, Samantha walked into the large, granite-floored courtroom. She wore a simple dark suit, her body still lean from the ordeal, but her posture was straight and unyielding. She sat beside her parents, George and her mother, who had already gained temporary custody of the girls. The air in the courtroom was thick, silent, and charged with finality. Andrew Mitchell was brought in first. Gone was the polished demeanor of the wealthy executive. He looked pale, hollowed out, the mask of indifference replaced by the cheap, frantic desperation of a trapped man. Margaret Mitchell followed, her face set in the familiar lines of cold disapproval, though the power she once wielded was now gone, replaced by the heavy hand of the justice system. Jennifer, looking small and defeated, stood nearby. The judge began to read the verdict. The voice was level, listing the horrific charges: fraud, conspiracy to commit attempted murder, and attempted child trafficking. When he reached Andrew, the judge detailed the calculated betrayal. Andrew Mitchell, you chose material wealth over the life of your wife and the welfare of your children. For your actions, this court sentences you to 8 years in a federal penitentiary. Andrew swayed slightly, his mouth opening soundlessly before he was quickly led away by 2 bailiffs. He did not look at Samantha. Next, Margaret's sentence was read. Her 5 years were handed down largely because of the conspiracy to terminate life support, which the judge classified as premeditated attempted murder. Margaret finally broke. She didn't cry, but she shouted, a cold, high-pitched shriek of outrage, protesting the injustice, swearing that Samantha was a lying monster. The bailiffs had to physically restrain her. Jennifer received 3 years, acknowledging her role as an accomplice, but also noting her slightly lesser involvement in the core planning. Samantha did not feel joy, only a deep, cold sense of closure. When the judge finalized the legal matters, the real victory emerged. Samantha was granted full, undisputed custody of both Hope and Grace. Andrew Mitchell was permanently stripped of all parental rights, a devastating and complete severance from the lives of the daughters he had tried to trade for money. With the legal drama settled, the focus shifted to reconstruction. The beautiful, cold house they had shared, the setting of the conspiracy and the evidence of Andrew's greed, was immediately sold. Samantha refused to ever step foot inside again. The entire sum from the sale, combined with the $500,000 from the life insurance policy, which, by the terms of the updated will, now belonged to Samantha as the primary beneficiary, was placed into a secure trust fund for Hope and Grace. Samantha wanted no part of Andrew's tainted fortune, only that it be used for the future of her children. She moved in with her parents, George and her mother, finding peace and unconditional love she hadn't realized she had been missing. The house was noisy, filled with the comforting chaos of 4 adults and 2 rapidly growing babies. Samantha spent her days recovering, holding her girls, and processing the extraordinary events of the past half year. The recovery was also mental. Samantha found that the silence forced upon her in the hospital had gifted her a unique perspective. She had heard everything, witnessed evil without consequence, and fought back from impossible odds. People needed to hear her story. She began writing, not just a memoir, but a powerful commentary on patients' rights, hospital communication, and the cruelty of financial exploitation within families. Her narrative was raw, honest, and utterly compelling. She became an advocate, traveling regionally to speak, her voice strong and unwavering, a testament to survival. She had been invisible for 30 days, but now she was utterly undeniable. 6 months had passed since the day she whispered the word babies in the ICU. It was a bright Saturday afternoon, and Samantha sat on a simple wooden bench in a local park. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and spring blooms. Hope and Grace, now 6 months old, sat side by side in a double stroller, gurgling with delight. Their hair was just starting to turn golden in the sunlight. They were healthy, whole, and completely oblivious to the war that had been fought over their tiny lives. Samantha watched her mother gently coo at Grace, while George bounced Hope lightly on his knee nearby. The sound of their laughter, the pure, unfiltered sound of a happy family, was the soundtrack to her new life. It was so loud, so vibrant, so utterly different from the cold, sterile silence of the ICU, where she had been forced to listen to her own death being plotted. She gently ran her finger over Grace's cheek, then Hope's. She realized that everything Andrew and Margaret had done, every ounce of calculated greed, had failed. They had wanted her gone, forgotten, a mere obstacle to their scheme. But the trauma hadn't destroyed her, it had remade her. She looked up at the deep blue sky, feeling the sun warm her skin. The past felt like a bad dream, a horror movie she had inexplicably navigated in a paralyzed state. They tried to bury me, she whispered to herself, a soft, triumphant smile touching her lips. They thought they were putting me into the ground permanently, a finished entity. She leaned back on the bench, watching her daughters reach for the air. But you don't bury mothers, she concluded, the conviction ringing true in her soul. You plant them. And now I am finally blooming. She was alive, free and utterly victorious, having fought for her children from inside a coma. The nightmare was over. The life she now held was real, earned by sheer, fierce will. Now, we want to know your opinion. From 0 to 10, what score does this story deserve?